we'll try to give you some insider information on what's going on. You probably heard some of the latest stories from the changes that have occurred down at the Board of County Commissioners. So I do bring greetings from my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Todd Portune, and our newly appointed and newly elected Vice President of the Board, Commissioner Dennis Dieters, who you might all know from Coleraine Township. So I told Dennis yesterday that I was going to bring greetings from him here and probably how much you probably miss him already and coming down to Hamilton County. But don't be worried. He's got your interest at heart, and he's going to be still fighting for Coleraine as well as the rest of Hamilton County. And I think Dennis is going to do an outstanding job being on the commission with us. So it's very exciting. So I got reelected to be president of the board this past Monday. We reorganized, and Dennis is vice president, and then Todd's our third commissioner. So there's a few changes that are occurring in Hamilton County, which are exciting. And I'm just going to give a quick update. I have to do the state of the county every year, which we're going to do in February. So I stole a couple of the slides from that to kind of give you a preview of that. If you're interested, the Rotary does it every year. It's February, I think, 11th this year down at the Hall of Mirrors. So if you want to participate in that, it's a great time, and the Rotary Club does a great job of presenting that. But just going through some of our updates here. So for our agenda in 2016, you know, looking at what we're trying to do and continuing on the great success we've had over the past several years in Hamilton County, we're going to continue to put public safety first. You know, folks, that's government's main job, is to make sure that our citizens are protected. So we're going to make sure that we do that. And as we go through a few more slides, you're going to see just how much we've invested in public safety within the county budget. Next up is protecting MSD ratepayers. So I didn't think when I became a county commissioner I would spend so much time in sewers. But that's what we tend to be doing, you know. It's just an incredible amount of money. And I got a few slides on that as well to kind of go into just what we're trying to do in order to protect the ratepayers. Because honestly, folks, to me, this is the biggest concern for our county's future, is how we're going to handle the MSD going forward and its operating structures, as well as the amount of money that we had to pay into it to fix it. And then we're going to continue to live within our means. You know, just every small business out here, you can't spend what you don't have. And definitely in Hamilton County, we can't. And so we have to make sure we right-size our budget, right-size our government to make sure that we can live within our means and afford the government that we can with the amount of money that we're receiving. And then we're going to continue moving the banks forward. I got an update on the banks project downtown and what we're doing this year, all the exciting things that are happening, and that big project that I think is you know, centerpiece for our county and our front door, so to speak, front lawn of our region. And then maintaining our critical public infrastructure. I'm not going to speak too much on this part, but if you guys have questions, but this is, you know, basically our roads, our bridges. I mean, just that kind of infrastructure that we need to make sure is sustained and taken care of in order to make sure that our community is safe and that businesses can thrive. And then this is an exciting one this year, preparing for the 2016 elections. I don't have a slide on this, but I'm going to briefly talk about it, and you can ask questions on it, because it is a pretty big year. And of course, Ohio has a big, you know, spotlight on us, and Hamilton County is one of those big spotlights too when you come to the state of Ohio. And so, as some of the issues that developed out of the last election that took place with our new e-books that were being used at the polling locations, there are updates that we're going to be doing to make sure that we get this year's right. We don't have any mistakes, and that first test drive will be the March primary on March 15th before the big show that will take place November 8th of this year. And then finally, we're going to continue our fight on the scourge of heroin. I know that's something that Dennis was working on here in Coleraine Township, and he's actually going to continue that down at the county for us and picking up what lessons he's in best practices that have been done here in Coleraine Township and applying it to other communities across Hamilton County to make sure that we continue to battle this, because this is, from a personal standpoint, a social standpoint, a problem that we're going to have to address because it's affecting families across our whole county. So our general fund, where does money all go, right? This is something like your family, your businesses, you make that pie chart to say, where are we spending all our money? And if you can definitely look at this chart, what jumps out, almost 75% of our general fund goes to law and order, as I like to say. The public safety portion of it is $81.9 million. That's the Sheriff's Department. That is also dealing with the Justice Center, the jail, and then also the Prosecutor's Office. And then on the judicial side, we have the court system, the clerk of courts. That's another $70 million. So folks, out of our $207 million budget, 150 of it is just spent on those two areas. So again, we are putting public safety first, because that is the role of county government. That's the role of what I believe government should be in making sure our citizens are protected. Because if people don't feel safe and where they're going to live, they're going to move away. They're going to go live in other areas. And so that's where we put a lot of our emphasis on within the county budget. And then the rest kind of breaks down general government operations, just all the other departments, Dusty's department at the auditor's office, the recorder's office, the coroner, all those other offices that we have, public works, the engineers department working with the streets, and then also our social services and economic development, which you can see is a very small part of our pie, but it provides probably one of the biggest return on our investments when we're just doing 1.9 million. But the amount of money you're going to see later on of how much we're getting back is massive. So what's the economy kind of looking like over the last few years and going forward? I mean, just this chart kind of shows the trends of our sales tax. And if you look at the county budget, we get our revenue sources from two main areas, and that's the sales tax, and that's also from our property tax. And from a standpoint, the property taxes have decreased because property values have gone down. And at the same time, our sales tax kind of got hit as well because of the economic downturn. So you had two forces colliding that really clobbered our budget. And today it was 207 million we're talking about. Well, about 2007, it was over 270 million. So we've decreased our county budget by $65 million. And you can see the reasons why. You have that massive dip in the middle there in 2008, 2009 because the economic downturn. But we're starting to improve. And so basically for the last full year, we've seen a 5.2% increase from 2014 in our sales tax. So the trend's looking much better. But we budget conservatively because you don't know what's going to happen. So for next year, we're budgeting about a 1% growth. Even though we saw 5% growth over the past year, we're just going to budget to 1% because we're not sure what's going to happen. But over the last 5 years, from 2011 to 2015, we've actually averaged 4.6% growth rate. So another 5% growth rate there, which is tremendous. But unfortunately, over the last 4 months, we've seen our sales tax starting to go down. So we're seeing a trend that's not looking too good. And as you can see from Wall Street and what's happening in the economy, things are starting to look a little interesting. And so again, I think it was very wise on our part to budget to a 1%, excuse me, a 1% increase in sales tax because you just don't know. And the last thing we want to do is budget to a 5% increase. All of a sudden, we're only given 1%, and we don't have enough money to pay off all the different programs we've started. So we're definitely trying to live within our means and make sure that we budget accordingly. And this trend shows that we're starting to move out of it, but we'll see how the next few months go if that trend continues to grow in the right area, which anything above 1% is good for us. And if you have any questions anytime, please feel free to ask them. But I'm just kind of going to hit a couple of the highlights, the budget, MSD, and then economic development, and I'll open up for questions. So Metropolitan Sewer District. As you know, it's owned by the county financially, but it's operated by the city of Cincinnati. It's a 50-year agreement that was signed back in 1968, the year I was born. And so when I turn 50, that thing expires, so I think that's a good birthday present. But I have to turn 50 to get it. So there's a little downside to that. You know, it's something that is, I think, one of the massive problems that Hamilton County has to face and how we're handling the sewer district. The Metropolitan Sewer District, you know, just this year we passed an operating and maintenance budget of over $118 million and a capital budget of $300 million. So just operating maintenance of just the system is over $100 million. Add on top of that, we also had debt service of over $238 million. I mean, sorry, total was $238 million. So that's another $115 million in debt service. So that's like your mortgage payment. So half of our operating budget is just going to pay the loans that we've taken out to do the projects that we have to do to get the consent decree from the EPA. That's just it's staggering that over 50% of our operating budget goes into debt service of just paying loans. And that's over $100 million a year right out the budget. And how do we pay for these things? MSD is not paid by income tax, not paid for property tax, not paid by sales tax. It's paid by the rates that are in your water bill and sewer bills. That's where we get the money from, is the ratepayers. So it's no extra sales tax. There's no extra, you know, property taxes or property levies on it. It is strictly out of the rates that you pay every month when you get your bill. Well, actually every 3 months when you get your bill. So it's staggering. It is actually absolutely staggering. And this is the debt when this is all done for this consent decree. So the federal government sued us, along with the Sierra Club and the Ohio EPA, to say your guys' sewer system has to be updated. You have too much overflows in basements of sewage, too much overflows in people's backyards of sewage. You need to fix the system. And then it comes down to, we had these combined sewer overflows, CSOs, where basically stormwater and sewage water would be combined together when you had a massive storm. And so when that takes place, all of a sudden you got, these massive rains that we have here, taking all this sewage water and just starts dumping it wherever it can, because the system can't control it, can't hold it all. And so EPA has come in and said, you have to fix it. And they gave a price tag on that of $3.2 billion. And that's in 2006 numbers. So if you increase it to what 2015, that's about $4 billion that we're going to be paying on fixing the system.
Disaster preparedness. No, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you all, especially groups like this. There's a sense of duty within your neighborhood. But for me, I want to also understand that there's a sense of responsibility for your families. So I'd like to come and do these talks to really kind of get you thinking of, preparing your home, preparing your family, so that you can also come and help us if we ever need it. So emergency management, have any of you ever heard of us? Thank God, one person. All right, good. No, that's usually the first thing I get is, so what is it that you all do? Well, we manage emergencies. It's the easiest definition, right? No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We really like to take a whole community approach to all hazards planning for emergencies, really. And all that means is anything and everything you can think of, from natural to man-made to technological. Those are more of your hazardous material spills that you have on the expressways. If anybody's ever traveled up and down 75 in their life, you always know something's overturned somewhere. To terrorism. And really when you speak of terrorism, we're speaking about lone wolves. Especially nowadays, what we're seeing is the internet is recruiting. So it's really more of an education portion of that. So those are the sort of things we're talking about. We're not talking about, hopefully not talking about another 9/11 event. But as you see Cincinnati being in the national news and international news for good things, this spring or this summer we'll have the NAACP convention at the same time as the Republican National Convention, at the same time as the Maccabees games in Columbus. So Ohio's going to have a lot of attention focused on it in the month of July. So really we take these things seriously. And we do have a great fusion center here in the region that helps emergency management and our first responders in intelligence gathering and information that we can then push out to groups like you. But really I kind of wanted to take a moment because we've entered severe weather season. We're out of winter. I never thought I was going to say that, but it's May and it's not 45 degrees yet. So, so I want to take a minute and talk about severe storms, but really I want to talk about that in terms of our 4 phases of emergency management. So really we look at this as mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, and how that translates to your own lives as well. So mitigation, what do you do to lessen the effects of a disaster? You stock up on water, you exercise your emergency response plans that you have in your homes, right? Fire drills, tornado drills, you download weather apps, you watch the weather on the news, you pay attention to that kind of thing. Please shake your heads. Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. So you mitigate the effects of a disaster on you. Same thing that we do here in Hamilton County. We have what they call an all hazards mitigation plan. And really all that looks at is any and all natural hazards that could affect this area. Windstorms, floods, tornadoes, landslides, if you can believe it, earthquakes, things like that, and how we can mitigate that. So if anybody's ever seen big retaining walls, maybe where there were once landslides, or perhaps we buy up property and just make it a big park in areas that used to flood, things like that. Those are mitigation actions that we use. Putting on those really strong wind, hurricane grade style shingles on your roofs, especially after Hurricane Ike, going out and buying a generator after Hurricane Ike. I discovered I had a gas hot water heater after Hurricane Ike, thank God. So, those kind of things to help mitigate. Preparedness. Now, this is our bread and butter. This is probably what I spent 99% of our time doing. The other 1% being what we're most known for in our Emergency Operations Center in Lower Price Hill. The big regional, it's just like you see in the disaster movies. There's big screens and computers and telephones and things like that. Doesn't really get used all that often, thankfully.
I've been there.
Yes. It is very cool. It is very cool. And thankfully, we've never had to open it for an actual emergency, mostly for pre-planned events and trainings. But it's just out of a disaster movie. So really, preparedness is what I'm talking about, the 72-hour kit. And why do we say 72 hours? It's not because these guys can't get to you or the fire can't get to you. It's that they have to prioritize. And really, in a disaster, what you see, anywhere from a small little localized flood to a Joplin-type event, is you look within your neighborhood, which is why I'm so pleased to see such a great turnout with the citizens in the Neighborhood Watch, because you all turn to each other. You go and check on each other. You go and help each other. We were just having a conversation after Ike. Everybody kind of came out and grilled all the food that was going to go bad. Neighborhoods tend to turn inwards to each other, and that's really where that 72-hour kit comes from as well. Because in the meantime, we're clearing roads, we're getting people to hospitals, we're trying to restore power to critical facilities. That's really, so we rely heavily on you all to help us, because if you can take care of yourselves, that really relieves a lot of pressure off of us. And so in the 72-hour kits, what do we have? You got your batteries, your flashlights, all of your usual stuff, your food. But what about your important documents? What about your insurance papers? How many of you have looked at your insurance in a while? This is something that we're seeing a lot of lessons learned from some of the other disasters is people, have you all seen that commercial? You think you're covered for this, but you're really covered for that? There's so much truth to that. Because people think, oh, well, I have insurance, I'm good. Well, what we're seeing after Sandy in New York City is they've redesigned the floodplains there. And now a lot of people that didn't have to have flood insurance now have to get flood insurance. And flood insurance is not cheap. It's very expensive. When they decommissioned the Lunken levee out at the airport, all those homes are now required to get flood insurance. So it's a very expensive, good insurance, but it can be very expensive for a homeowner, especially on a home, middle-class family. It adds a bit of a strain. So I always encourage people to, one, talk to your insurance agent to find out what you're covered for, and two, know where your insurance papers are, make copies electronically if possible, put them on those little flash drives, wills, bank account statements, passwords, photos, of pets, of cars, of, jewelry, of things of value to you, because photos are very helpful. And then you download all of that onto a flash drive, and then I want you to send it away, like 50 miles away at least. Don't send it to me. I'm very flattered, but I cannot be in charge of all of that. That's a lot of pressure. Send it away, send it somewhere safe. Well, again, what we're seeing is when you enter what we call the recovery phase, whether you're in a fender bender or a major disaster, it jostles you mentally. It takes you a minute to kind of get right. And so here you are, you've just lost everything, you have everything but the clothes on your back, and somebody's asking you who your insurance carrier is. You don't know where your next meal is, you don't know where you're going to be sleeping. The last thing you can think about is any of these important documents. And again, coming out of Sandy, we saw a lot of stories of people whose houses were literally in the Atlantic Ocean with all of their stuff, but they couldn't get any assistance because all of their important documents were out in the middle of the ocean. So we really strongly encourage that kind of redundancy. And then do it for your neighbors as well, Any family members, I strongly encourage you all to do that, especially for those that have family members, maybe you're taking care of parents or you have what we call access and functional needs within your family. So that's basically anybody that can't do for themselves during an emergency, which is pretty much anybody. But in this case, they're talking about children, elderly, physical disabilities, maybe temporary, maybe they've had knee surgery and they can't get around all that much. So what extra care do you need to think about for them? Medications, durable medical equipment, things of that nature, toys. I mean, I've never thought about any of this stuff, but I've got to in about 8 weeks. So, things like that you wouldn't think of normally. You kind of grab up your food and you'd go. But kids need to be entertained, I'm learning. So sheltering items, things like that. Now, Cincinnati's a little unique. We never have had to shelter anywhere. Really what you're looking for are more reception centers where you can go and charge your cell phone. We don't have sort of those widespread hurricane-type disasters. Everybody's been able to, again, find a neighbor or a family member to go stay with. But we do encourage you to think, what do I need in those 72 hours if I had to shelter? Just in case. And then there's the response. So, you all have your preparedness plan, you've mitigated for anything, but you still have to respond to a tornado or a flood. How are you going to evacuate? Where are you going to go? And then how are you going to communicate that you're okay? Those are the big three. Those are the big three that, as a county, we worry about. So for yourselves, I would also encourage you all to think about, your evacuation plans. What if your car's gone? What if what if your neighbor who you were going to stay with is no longer available? They left, maybe. Sheltering, communications, cell phones. Everybody thinks, oh, I just got a cell phone. What if cell phone towers are down? I'm looking at my ham radio guy. And you can't all call him. That's not fair. Social media is actually really big in this realm. The Red Cross has a phenomenal app that they cover floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and I really enjoy their tornado one. They have an I am safe component, so it'll hit your email, your Twitter, and your Facebook page, and you can type a little message like, I'm okay, I'm here at so-and-so's house, or I'm at this shelter, we're okay, and it'll shoot out to everybody, and so your loved ones will know where you are. I mean, you saw it after 9/11. If anybody tried to use a phone down here, phone lines were jammed because everybody's calling. Text messages get through a lot easier, so if anybody texts, I highly recommend it. You can always communicate with your family that way.
Thanks for coming. It's very encouraging to see you all come out. We weren't sure if there would be 5 people or 500 people, so we know it's somewhere in between. So we appreciate you coming out. I do want to talk to you a little bit about mental health and addiction side of this, but also talk to you about maybe some ways that the community here can work to prevent or intervene early on with people who are in addiction. So there's 2 other therapists that work with me that are here. I just want to point them out. Brian Balasek sits over here, is my business partner and is part of the company. Brian does a lot of work with addictions and starting an addiction recovery group in July. And over here in the green is Jesse Bowlitz. Jesse works with a lot of people with, one of her specialties is trauma and anxiety and depression. And the reason why I bring that up is what we find at our private practice is that the overwhelming majority of individuals who come to us for treatment for addictions also have a mental health issue. Typically with, generally speaking, anxiety, depression, past trauma, and it's not infrequent for these individuals then to take heroin or use pain pills to self-medicate. So we see a lot of that. So what the average addict that we see, his appearance or her appearance, is typically somebody who's about 20 or 30 years old, professional, not your stereotypical kind of gutter drunk. It's the person who, not infrequently, hurt his or her back, went to the doctor, prescribed Percocet or Vicodin. The doctor at some point just stopped prescribing it for one reason or another. And that person didn't go out seeking to shoot up heroin or seeking pain pills to begin with. They just need something to help manage their own pain. And so from that, the tolerance, as you're probably aware with any of the substances, tolerance builds up. They take more and more and find themselves addicted. One of the things that we know with being addiction therapists is that many times with heroin and pain pills, the addict doesn't really continue to take the pain pills, the opiates, the pain pills, or heroin simply to keep getting high. Many times they continue to take it to avoid withdrawal symptoms. One of my clients described what withdrawal from heroin was like, just going cold turkey. He said, Steve, imagine the worst case of flu that you could ever imagine, multiplied by 100, and it'll last for about 10 days. And while that's going on, while you're sick and you don't have any energy, you're thrown up, you're sweating, you're nauseous, you know you can pick up your phone and in 5 minutes have your drug dealer come and give you what you need. You shoot it up and all the withdrawal symptoms are gone. So what we find in addiction recovery is that we really have a ton of respect for those individuals who are working towards recovery. It's one of the hardest things I watch people do. And those that work it and sometimes fall off the wagon, so to speak, and get back on, they work recovery. If you've ever known anybody to do that, or if you yourself have done that, that's one of the bravest things you could possibly do. It really is. And so many of the therapists we know out in the community feel that same way. We feel that when people are in recovery from trauma, like sexual abuse or physical abuse and addictions, that takes a lot of strength. Addicts are not weak people that have a character flaw. They are people who physically have gotten addicted to some kind of substance and are working towards recovery. Okay? So part of what I was asked to do in my presentation was talk about some of the indications that a loved one may be abusing pain pills or shooting heroin. Okay? So as a lifelong, almost a lifelong, not quite lifelong, but living in Green Hills for quite a while. Some of you I know, some of you know my mom because everybody knows my mom or knew my mom. Some of you saw me do some things I shouldn't have been doing when I was a teenager and called my mom, and my mom met me at the door. So Green Hills has a soft spot in my heart, and that's why I initiated some contact with Chief Fertleman and got things going. So I hope that this is helpful for you today, and there's some questions and answers after we all present. So some of the indications that somebody might be moving into an addiction with opiates. And by the way, we passed out, Brian passed out this form front and back. There are indications of warning signs for addiction. So I'm not going to read these to you because I know you can read. But some things that we see that are very common is something we call, or the addicts call nodding off. Does anybody know what that is? Somebody for no explained reason will be sitting there and just kind of nod off. That's usually followed by a period of time of euphoria or high energy. Not always, but usually there's that period of time, high energy, and then sit down and just kind of nod off. I've had people do that in a alcohol and drug group, just nod off. Somebody relapsed on one occasion, and he's just going to keep his eyes open in the group. If you see a lot of lost and stolen or misplaced items, medications, trinkets, we've heard of people stealing things from their parents that to us would think, why would you do that? I mean, you could steal a car and get a whole lot. Why would you just do this trinket thing? Well, addicts, when they're trying to, heroin addicts or opiate addicts, when they're just simply trying to avoid withdrawal, will take anything they can get their hands on to sell it to get money to buy drugs. Does that make sense? And kind of what we look for and try to tell people is what you're really looking for is a change in a person's behavior or their emotional state that can't be explained by something else. You know, if a person's nodding off, yet they seem to be getting enough sleep and enough rest, that might be an indication that something's going on. If somebody is normally a good student in school, but then their grades begin to drop, and it's unexplainable why their grades are dropping. There could be a number of reasons, one of which could be an addiction to some kind of substance. If a person's missing a lot of appointments, except to get their medications, that's probably an indication. We will have clients who will miss some of our appointments, but when they're scheduled to see the doctor who's prescribing Vicodin, they're right there. Okay, because that's really important. Now imagine putting yourself in their shoes. If I don't get this appointment, I'm going to have the worst case of flu I could ever imagine, and it's going to last for about 10 days. If I'm in that boat, I'm going to hoof it to my doctors too, and I'm going to get the medication, right? Are you all with me on that? Yeah. So we also look for things like insomnia, pin-sized pupils. If you talk to somebody, and in some cases they're prescribed this medication and they're not abusing it, if their pupils are pinpricked, that's many times that's a physiological result of taking opiates, things like that. So we're looking at not radical changes in behavior that's not really explained by other means. Okay. So the rest of the information's on here. On the front, there's information about alcohol use and abuse of other drugs. On the back is a list of warning signs that we look for in people who are addicted to opiates. Now, Chief Stein and I and Chief Earlman, we were talking before the presentation, and I don't want to steal your thunder at all. One of the things we talked about was, well, how do we get ahead of this? And they said, you don't arrest your way out of this. And, there's maybe not a real clear answer as to how to get ahead of this, except that the community gets involved. And when the community gets involved, it speaks to the elected officials, and the elected officials tend to hear that, right? So the example is MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Once that began to take root, things began to change. The things with opiates, that the addicts that we work with, again, aren't, I want to try to help, in the next few minutes, try to help people understand that when we think about addicts, many of us shake our heads like, oh, those terrible, awful people. But you and I are just one pill away from becoming an addict. We're just one stressful event where we might say, you know what, I have extra Percocet, I'm going to pop them in my mouth and feel better about things. Most of the addicts that we work with are strong, intelligent, professional people that didn't wake up that morning saying, I'm going to become an addict. Things happen and people slide into it. So part of how the community can rally around addicts and actually intervene early on is to understand that addicts are just people like you and I. They're people like you and I that, some of us turn to other ways of coping, addicts turn to substances. Now, what can you do if you have a neighbor, a family member, a friend that you suspect using substances? First, have a conversation with them. Try to inquire with them about why you're seeing these changes in behavior. It could be, the changes in behavior can be explained by anything. So you inquire about it, talk to them about it. If a person acknowledges that they are using substances, there are treatment centers all around town. Our information for Restoring Hope is on the front here. You can call us and use this as a resource. Either we can provide services or we can refer you to, we have some knowledge of the services around. We can refer you to rehabilitation centers, to other places around the county. We'd be thrilled to do that. So those are some of the real practical things that you can be doing when you think you have somebody that might be an addict. If you have a question about this later on, like a couple of weeks from now, you can call us. We'll be happy to talk with you about it, maybe how to help your loved one. Okay, so I think in a little bit we're going to have some Q&A, and if you have any questions about what I've talked about, we'll be happy to talk to you, or you can talk to Brian over here in the purplish shirt, or Jesse over there in the green. We'll all be happy to help you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is here in his capacity as the director of the Hamilton County Heroin Task Force. Tom Sinan is a veteran of the United States Marines. He is a 23-year-old law enforcement veteran. He is the police chief of the village of Newtown. He's the past president of the Hamilton County Chiefs of Police Association. 9-year Hamilton County SWAT team member, where he holds the position of team leader. He has assisted the United States Marshals Fugitive Apprehension Team, and currently chairs the Supply Reduction Arm of the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition, and serves as the director, as I mentioned, of the Hamilton County Heroin Task Force. These positions have given him a widespread view of the heroin epidemic. He has spoken on behalf of our Police Chiefs Association many times. It allows him to work with some of the top experts from law enforcement, treatment, addiction specialists, doctors, elected officials, and others who are fighting to reduce the impact of heroin abuse. Chief Tom Sinan.
Everyone took my thunder away and moved the microphone up, so I'm done. I do sit on the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition Steering Committee, and just to give you a little idea of what that is, Neil touched on some numbers, the sheriff touched on some numbers to kind of quantify how big this problem is. It is not a Green Hills problem. It is not a Newtown problem, a Springfield Township problem, nor is it an urban Cincinnati problem. It is a nationwide problem, especially in Ohio. There were 414 people that died in Hamilton County from drug overdoses in 2015. That is more than auto accidents and homicides combined. The state of Ohio was second in the country for overdose deaths. The Sheriff's Department in 2014 processed about 10,000 people through the Hamilton County Justice Center on heroin-related incidents alone. So it kind of tells you the widespread problem that we have. So the coalition was designed for that purpose. One, it was overwhelming, but number two was we understood that this addiction was different than most. This was not just about someone coming from a bad home. This was not just about street deals. This was a widespread issue that involves not only mental health, but genetics. Where you grew up, where you live. There was another key factor, and just to go through a little bit of history to tell you how we got here. If you ever read the book Dreamland, it kind of gives you a good overview of where we got here, how we got here. Partly was in Portsmouth, Ohio, when big drug companies had kind of pushed the American Medical Association, doctors and nurses, into prescribing pain pills. Pain became one of the 5 vital signs, and those of you who went to the doctor probably know that they asked you on a scale of 1 to 10 when you went in, what was your pain? If it was a 10, what they would do to try to get the pain down was prescribe you Oxycontin, Oxycodone, Percocets, those types of things. So when they asked you in the survey, how is your pain now? Well, now I feel pretty good, it's a 2. Well, all that information went on to insurance companies, it was all part of surveys, and that is what led a wide portion of the population to become opiate dependent. So this is not a gutter drug. This drug knows no race, no religion. It could care less if you're rich, it could care less if you're poor. It literally has touched every aspect of society. So what happened with the pain being part of that management was the Attorney General's office and law enforcement, man, we're good at one thing, and that is arresting people. And we shut those pain mills down. We were really, really successful at that. The part that we didn't know and that we couldn't predict was that we left a segment of society that was opiate addicted. And there's one really, really bad thing about drug dealers and drug cartels. They're extremely good business people. They really, really know their market and they know their customer. So when they saw that these pain pills were being shut down and there was this market for opiate addicted people, black tar heroin and heroin started coming up through Portsmouth, Columbus, Cincinnati, northern Kentucky, Indiana. And that is why this is kind of the epicenter of this whole issue. So getting back to the coalition, knowing all these factors, we knew that it wasn't just going to be law enforcement. Like the sheriff said, I'm very proud that law enforcement was one of the first ones to stand up and say, hey, we need to fix this. But law enforcement, what I'm even more proud to say was, hey, we can't fix this. This is going to take fire, EMS, treatment, prevention, education, community grassroots efforts. And that's what the coalition did, was bring all these together. So there's 4 arms of the coalition. Supply reduction, harm reduction. We'll get back to supply reduction. Is basically that is we're supposed to reduce the supply of heroin coming into this area. What we've done on the law enforcement end is kind of different. We knew it wasn't just going to be supply. We're also working on the demand part. And we've been very effective with not only putting people into treatment, but part of that is, if you've heard of Corey Township's model, the QRT team, quick response team, actually putting a law enforcement officer with the EMS person with the addiction specialist going out and intervening with those that are addicted. So from there it went on to harm reduction, which is part of firing EMS. Part of that came out of, what came out of that was Narcan. And it was kind of controversial when we first did this, and Neil and I are on the same page, was I voted and really pushed for Narcan to be issued to all law enforcement personnel in Hamilton County that wanted it. The Sheriff's Department was already ahead of it. They had already issued the Narcan to their folks. It was kind of controversial, and this is kind of the feedback and the stigma that we need to change. I was giving talks to people, and this is literally what I would hear. Why don't you let them die? And what bothered me was there was no other segment of society that we say that about. We don't say that about someone who's an alcoholic. We don't say that about someone who has mental illness. I've been on multiple runs with car crashes with the same person drinking and driving. no one ever told me let them die. I've been on multiple runs for suicide runs, and at no time did society tell me not to save their life. As a matter of fact, what society told me was risk your life to save their life. So it's kind of dumbfounded how this came back that we couldn't issue someone Narcan. There's controversy that it enables people. Everyone's got one or two stories where they'll say that someone addicted will say, yeah, I know it's a safety net, but the vast majority of the people aren't going out taking a dose of heroin thinking, well, if I overdose, at least I'm going to be saved, because most of them don't know what they're getting. And part of the trend that we're finding, and I'm sure that Dave can talk a little bit more about this, is fentanyl. In 2013, there were 8 fentanyl-related overdose deaths. In 2015, there were 238 fentanyl overdose deaths. So that has exacerbated this problem, and now we have not only heroin, but fentanyl. And that's the thing about the addicts, they have no clue what they're getting. So from the harm reduction, we got treatment, we got prevention. These are all the heads of these agencies. It's not just a representative, it's literally the head of Mental Health and Addictive Services in Hamilton County, the Tyler House, the county commissioners sit on that board, Ann Barnum and Jim Schwab for Interact for Health, Prevention First with Mary Hay. All these people sit at a table, and what's so profound about this is that nowhere else do you have these groups sitting at one table. And an officer, my very first meeting, I sat there and I was surprised they didn't kick me out, because I was kind of like Neil said, I was screaming and yelling and going to overdose deaths and saying, how can I just walk away and let this person bring them back and let them do heroin again? And these people were like, this isn't right. And we started forming the coalition and putting out the Narcan. And one of the things coming out of the coalition that was announced earlier, will be pushed out a little bit later, is about $1 million to $1.5 million for treatment. That sounds like a lot. It's really not a whole lot. It should open up about maybe 40 to 50 beds, and that's about it. I've heard a number, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I heard it from a specialist that there's anywhere around 3,000 to 4,000 current addicts in Hamilton County addicted to opiate. So 40 beds, even if that number is not even, let's even be conservative and say it's 1,500, obviously it's not going to make that big of a drop in the bucket. So with all this, all the push, all the dedication, determination from law enforcement, a lot of what I've been asked lately is, are we making a difference? And my response to that is, a year ago, we had no coalition and we had no task force. So every life that we have saved since March of 2015 and June of 2015 is a difference. The task force has a unique mission, and that is not your normal drug task force. They're not necessarily making buys. They are part to make their investigation. But what it was really about was investigating those deaths backwards and holding those people accountable. And it's kind of funny because I've written a couple pieces about being tougher on drug dealers, and you know the pushback I get the most on is being tougher on drug dealers. And a lot of it is from elected officials who say, well, Tom, that's very good, that's a great idea, but we don't have money to put people in jail. And my thing is, well, maybe we got the wrong people in jail. Maybe the addict is one that we need to be put in medically assisted treatment. There's currently a bill in the state legislation that would take away civil forfeitures from law enforcement, that money that we're using to fight drugs. My thing is, why don't we put those people that are selling this drug, this poison, especially when it comes to fentanyl, because they know fentanyl's killing people, put them in jail, take their money, and pay for medically assisted treatment. And let those addicts out and put them in those treatment centers, and then that would help reduce that supply and demand. But like I said, that's the pushback you get. So the task force has arrested about a couple dozen people, anywhere from local charges to federal charges. Some of them charged with manslaughter. They've been directly indicted for the death of a person, looking at anywhere from 15 to 25 years. We've made a difference both on treatment and prevention end. We made a difference on the task force end. But I was sitting in a meeting today with WCPO, they have an editorial board, and we were discussing this, and they're like, well, Chief, you wrote this op-ed, what's your plan, what do you think we need to do? And I said, we can't do it. I'm proud of law enforcement that we've taken a stand, I'm proud that we've taken the initiative, but we can't arrest our way out of this. Nor are we medical professionals, nor are we treatment specialists. We will be strong advocates, we'll be very vocal, we will give our opinion, but to be honest with you, it's you. It's not just the people that are impacted that's going to make a difference. It has to be the people that aren't impacted who say, I've had enough. Just about every crime that you deal with in law enforcement, we can relate back to drugs. And more than likely, I guess recently, I would go on a limb and say that the majority of it is heroin or fentanyl related. And until you get tired of it, and when people tell me, well, it doesn't impact me, it does, because it impacts his budget, just like it impacts my budget. With Narcan, responses, it impacts you because your house was broken into, your car was broken into. That's your property values. When enough of you have had enough, people listen to you. And the people I'm talking about are the judges, elected officials, those who hold the purse strings when it's a group of you saying enough is enough. We want money for medically assisted treatment. We want those drug dealers in jail. You know, Dave and I are on SWAT, and we'll tell you that just about every operation, you look at the criminal record, and that drug dealer has had 3, 4, sometimes even more convictions for drug trafficking. I'm astonished. I'm like, I cannot believe we're going to pick this person up. So you have to start saying enough's enough. And when you all get together and say it, it has a lot more power than I have. So that's why I'm going to end it is, I'm going to put it back onto you. And when you as a group, when you as a society say, we want changes, then things will change. And a way to do that is go to www.injecthope.com. It is the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition website. We got Claremont County, Butler County, and Warren County are all part of it. It's a regional effort. It's got a list of resources, how you can get involved. It has tips for drugs. It has the sheriff's tip line, and also treatment and prevention. So get on that website, and then another good thing to look at that is with Interact for Health, Prevention First. They're really good at getting grassroots efforts together, which I highly recommend. But part of that grassroots effort, and this is my personal opinion, is we can't just have grassroots efforts in Green Hill, Springfield Township, Newtown, Colerain Township. We can't just have pockets of it. It's got to be all of us being cohesive in one voice, telling the elected officials, this is the change we want. This is where we want our money spent. This is how we want our communities to be. And when you do that, then things will get done. Thank you.
The Cincinnati Central Riverfront Plan converted 195 acres of wasteland between the Ohio River and downtown into an economically successful, vibrant, mixed-use community.
The master plan process is, of course, critical. You must document the vision, the big picture.
The only way this riverfront development was possible was through people working together.
This really is about making sure that you put all of your efforts and all of your energy into getting past differences and getting the job done.
Because of the plan and the vision and the developer, we came up with a development that had a lasting and positive effect on our community for many, many years to come.
The project capitalized on a major public investment in 2 new stadiums to transform the Central Riverfront with a public park, entertainment venues, and apartments for 300 residents.
Creating a new front door for the city, in fact, a kind of front yard for the region, if not Southwest Ohio.
It would be my dream, that neighborhood that people talk about just being right at the front door of downtown. I hope that's the vision I think we all had when we started the project. In 20 years, I hope that's the vision that people see, that the people who came before them were trying to create.
I think the fact that an outside group has bestowed an award of excellence upon the Cincinnati community is an affirmation that the path that we're on is the right path. The approach that we're taking, which is a collaborative approach in order to get things done, is well worth the effort.
The beauty of this project is that we took it from a plan through execution, and that's really what it's all about.
The American Planning Association is proud to present the 2013 National Planning Excellence Award for Implementation to Cincinnati, Ohio's Central Riverfront Rebirth through Planning.
The way we like to spend time as a family is hiking, definitely. That's our biggest thing. In the morning, they would just come up in our rooms and say, okay, we're going on the hike. We're like, okay.
Spending time in Wynwoods brings us closer together. I think that is part of my childhood that I absolutely loved, and it's important to me that I pass that on.
There aren't a lot of places that you go in Cincinnati where you see a lot of different types of people engaging in kind of like the same space. So that to me is the first thing I notice about it every time I come here.
Because we live in the city, the park's efforts to give us green space is essential.
I think this is one of the few parks that have a mixture of different kind of activities.
So you can hike, bike, roller skate, rollerblade, canoe, kayak, fish,
eat, sleep, birdwatch,
picnics,
eat. I said that.
To me, great parks is a great way to build family and community.